Just who am I? Am I an Americana? Am I a Spanish American? Am I a Latina?
I'm proud to be a Chicana. Chicana means strength to me.
Am I Hispanic? Am I a Chicana? Am I Latinx?
It means we're proud. We're proud of who we are. We're proud of our ancestry.
I'm all of them. I'm all of them. Yo soy Chicana.
It's about our culture. It's about family. It's about our food. It's about our language.
We are probably some of the strongest women in this country. I am a Chicana, a woman born here in this country, but with very strong Mexicana roots and indigenous roots, and whose life is dedicated to social justice.
We have a unique place, and sometimes we're the nurturer and sometimes we're the warrior, and sometimes we're both.
Many people have asked me over time what it meant when I said I was Chicana, that I'm not Hispanic, I'm not Latina, I'm Chicana. That came out of that time in our history, in the early years of the Chicana movement, where we began to look at each other and say, who are we? Where do we belong in this history, in this place?
The original inhabitants of Denver, at least going back about 500 or so years, were the Cheyenne and Arapaho, Kiowa, Comanche, indigenous peoples who came to this area because of natural resources and migration patterns of big game.
We have to honor that. We have to recognize the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, the Ute. We have to know that Confluence Park they gathered. We have to know that they gathered along the South Platte and hunted in this area.
We were people that went through colonization, like many peoples did here, but there was also the attempt to create cultural and historical amnesia with us. Oh, to forget that you might be Pueblo Navajo, forget that you might be Maya and Azteca, forget that you might be Tarahumara and Yaqui, forget that you might be, that the blood that runs through you might be the blood of First Nations people, indigenous people. And in doing so, taking away your moral standing to say, I've always been here. This is my homeland.
When this land was under the Spanish, there were efforts made to bring settlers into what was then the northern frontier of what was then New Spain and then New Mexico. And they would be given land and access, often private land, and also access to common lands called ejidos. And so there were early settlements as early as the 1700s in northern New Mexico, well, Santa Fe even earlier than that.
When the Spanish came, where they really concentrated was the San Luis Valley and northern New Mexico. Santa Fe was the oldest town before Jamestown. Think about that.
ancestors were here they came over from Spain as settlers in what was then the territory of Mexico. And when they got the land grants, they moved up north into Colorado, and my mother's parents and my father, their parents, all their relatives, they all landed in the San Luis Valley.
I was going through some books and I found a book on the Rivera family on my mother's side. The Riveras have been in New Mexico for 472 years.
There was a term Spanish American. My grandparents and great grandparents clung to that term because it made them what? More acceptable? More Spanish? And then as history unfolded and you begin to research it, you realize, well, Spain was not the good guy here. Spain was a colonizer that came to this country with the sole purpose of, in fact, getting rid of people that were Indigenous and First Nations people. And we're tied to that. But we also intermarried, and that's where the whole idea of mestizo came about.
My mom says, I'm more Native American than I am Mexican because her grandmother was Native American. She was an Indian woman that happened to marry my other great-great-grandfather, Montoya.
And as a result, we were born a mixed race. Now we call it biracial. That's what it would, but it's, to us, was a mestiza. We were of the two bloods.
In 1846, the American nation, the expanding American nation at the time, went to war with a very struggling Mexican nation.
So most people don't know that then there was an illegal war because Congress didn't approve the war against Mexico that President Polk launched because he wanted the seaboard. He wanted the California seaboards. That's what he wanted.
The war ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which essentially gave, well, $15 million, which was nothing at the time, the entire Southwest plus California to the United States. And so you have those very rooted old Mexican settlements in southern Colorado, in northern New Mexico, and throughout the Southwest. And overnight, they became Americans. And actually, the treaty said that they had 1 year to either leave, go to Mexico, or to become American citizens.
Mom says, but Indian, Spanish, they think we're all Mexicans, but we didn't come from Mexico. We were all born here in the United States, what is now the United States.
My father would tell me stories of Mexican, people who always lived in Texas, but then the border changed. That's what he said. We were here, the border changed.
For many Mexican Americans of the Southwest, the border crossed them. They didn't cross the border. first Mexicans arrived with the gold rush, and there are some documented examples of people of Mexican descent panning for gold in the Platte River in the late 1850s when everyone was kind of turning their attention to that area as potential gold areas. And so there have always been migration patterns between those settlements and places like Denver. Often you would have people, agricultural people, who would settle in those older settlements in southern Colorado, migrate to the north seasonally for jobs in Denver, even north of Denver in the fields, like the beet fields of what is today Weld County. Well, to be any person of color during the Great Depression was to be scapegoated for a lot of the economic problems that the country was experiencing. To be Latino, Chicano, Mexican American at the time was certainly to be scapegoated as the other, and often the first fired from jobs as jobs were being eliminated nationwide, particularly in the Southwest, and also to be ineligible for many of the government programs, the relief programs such as the WPA or direct relief programs in the New Deal. It was also to be excluded. In 1936, the governor of Colorado declared martial law for 10 days and closed down the border between Colorado and New Mexico to stop that migration, that seasonal migration of laborers headed to the agricultural fields of northern Colorado from New Mexico, and they tended to be mostly Hispanic.
Our people were very discriminated against. My father was. I saw him refuse service because of the way he looked, because he knew only Spanish.
We were called dirty Mexicans, black Mexicans, greasy Mexicans, no good for nothing Mexicans, lazy Mexicans.
My mother and many of our people went to schools where they were punished for speaking Spanish. Our parents didn't raise us learning that language because they feared that we would be punished, that we would be hurt and harmed because we chose to speak that Spanish.
I had that influence of my dad, who was fiercely one of those who grew up in a time when they were ostracized for being brown, being Mexicano, the whole thing, no dogs, no Mexicans allowed. And so he was very fierce in his wanting all his daughters to speak English.
My parents grew up and you have to understand, they grew up in a time when you walked into the theaters and you saw two signs in Del Norte, and I still remember as a little kid. Mexicans up, whites, and I refused to go up, so I had to sit outside. When I got home, my mom told me, when we were visiting in Del Norte, she said, "That isn't the way it is." And I said, "Mom, what do you mean it isn't the way it is? Look at me. I'm white." And she says, "Yeah, Hita, but they don't look at you that way. They look at us as Mexicans." She pulled out her birth certificate, and on her birth certificate it said, color, Mexican.
We lived in a city that we were invisible in. We were not accepted, couldn't get jobs. We had to build our own houses because we couldn't get loans or people who would help us do that. There was incredible confrontation with police all the time between our community and them. Clearly, we didn't have people on the police department that looked like us, any way you looked at it. And their whole attitude was always one of, they were always in that siege mentality, a military, we were to be kept suppressed. That was their role. Keep those spics in order.
The city was not hiring them. It would be not until the 1970s when we get our first, for instance, Chicano or Mexican American firefighters, right? So there was a long history of discrimination. You know, you have those civil service jobs that were dominated by whites. And I'll also add to that a history in the educational realm of not teaching the youth their history. So what they were being taught and by whom was really important. They were being taught a very white version of history. They were being taught the literature of white figures. I mean, their identity, their history, their creative contributions to the culture were non-existent. And further, they were being taught in schools that were dominated by white teachers and white administrators.
We didn't have anything to see ourselves as a community. Most of the kids I grew up with never had gone to Mexico, never learned to speak Spanish, never had seen Mexican art in the home or in books, and absolutely nothing in school. They thought they were teaching us Mexican culture by teaching us the Mexican hat dance. They really and truly thought that they were doing us a big service. We had no books in Spanish, no books reflective of our culture, zilch. Not even in junior high or high school. We never knew what a Ute was, a Arapaho, Apache, none of those Navajo. Of course, they have their own names for themselves. We never heard any of those names. We never learned a drop of that history. We never learned about any Spanish surnamed people from this region. Nothing, zilch, literally.
So that's kind of the backdrop of where we're at when the Chicano movement began. The leadership of that movement, my dad, Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, said, wait a minute, we will not sit back. We will not be silent. We will stand up. We are going to start a crusade for justice.
We're watching Radical Anglo move.
You get this burst of activism in the 1960s due to a confluence of factors. One being the African American civil rights movement, which was, you know, very active since the 1950s. In addition, and this is very significant, is the war in Vietnam, which politicized a generation of young men who came from Chicano families and communities and were disproportionately drafted into the war, this war for democracy abroad, and then came back to the very same discrimination they experienced before. Out of all of that discrimination comes a political consciousness and a desire to do something about it.
And we were out in the streets reflecting the desire to have this be an America, and I don't mean this to be rhetorical, but an America for each and every one of us.
The Chicano movement to me is parallel to the civil rights movement that our black sisters and brothers went through. The John Lewis's, to us, that's Corky Gonzalez.
From Denver, Colorado, Rudy Corky Gonzalez.
He was an incredibly successful boxer, could have made it out of the barrio, could have moved on, had his own businesses, and couldn't just do it for himself. He was raised with a different value system. Familia y comunidad. Always. We had great strength in that. We had an incredible leader in Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez who made us believe in ourselves, that we shouldn't be treated any less.
When Mexicans start to get it, they say, well, gee, they might think I'm a bad guy. You know, the hell with what they think. Because what they thought has created all the problems for the mass of our people.
In '69, I'll go back, there were members of our organization whose children went to West High School. And they came to complain about a teacher that badmouthed Chicanos and Mexicanos, about the lack of the curriculum that didn't speak to our history. They organized the West Side Walkout. And I was assigned by my dad to be that mentor kind of person that would help them and make sure we organized everything was in place. And so we did. We marched on West High School, and in the film, you'll see me. I have the bullhorn with the pigtails and the red ties on it, and people said it was us that somehow rioted. It wasn't. The police were called, and they descended on us, and that's when the other part, the parents and grandparents, like my dad, and our older community didn't tolerate it and tried to come to our rescue, and they tear gassed the west side for 3 days. It was a police riot. Many of us were arrested and charged, and then charges were dropped.
Blood flows amid riot and disorder. How many times?
In more traditional narratives of the Chicano movement, you hear men's names, right? The 4 horsemen of the Chicano movement, and you're like, no, that's not right. So there were a lot of women involved, and they played very key roles. They sometimes weren't given the very public roles of speaking and hosting these demonstrations and so forth, but they were there. They were just as active in the planning, in the expression of this new political consciousness, and also in the logistical part of the movement.
In the Chicano movement, my mother was, along with many of the other women, an integral part of the movement, its organizing, and the crusade for justice.
They were the backbone. They were taking care of families, but they were also the backbone.
When they needed to do fundraisers or pull together support for actions that would be taken, much of that work was done by women. Women who did the calling, women who would get other comadres and aunts and grandmas to come and be involved, to create, cook the food, to create the dinners, to raise the money to support the action.
But they were the ones who were in the background, preparing, editing speeches, typing out speeches, taking care of the children, teaching, nourishing, and nurturing.
The families helped each other, and there was a sense of community back then, because there were so many things that they didn't have, but what they did have was each other, and what we call now social capital, right? And so they used their social capital and their love for familia and their love for community, and they supported each other and helped each other.
They worked for the benefit of the family, not the benefit of the individual. That was their difference. They worked for the benefit of the entire community, not for the benefit of themselves individually. A lot of people say, so did the movement accomplish what it needed to do? It accomplished a great deal. It moved us further than we'd ever been.
I think it has made a difference politically. There are more people registered to vote. I think it has taught us that there's power in the vote and that we have a right to be a major part of the voting bloc.
It's because of the Chicano movement that we have people in college and we have professors now that look like us, talk like us, think like us, because there was a Chicano movement.
And now you see Chicanas in very prominent positions.
My name is Ramona Martinez, and I'm a former member of Denver City Council. I was elected president of city council, not once, not twice, but 3 times. When you're a minority woman, you have to not only try harder, but you have to prove yourself just as, even twice as hard. All the men were getting elected, all the men were doing that. And the women never really got to that point until I finally said, enough's enough. I got involved in Head Start programs, helping kids in Head Start programs. I did that. And eventually, it involved in me seeing how important it was to get involved in politics and to be at the table. If you didn't have a seat at the table, making all the rules, changing laws and so forth, then we really wouldn't have a voice. The city was really seeing the changes that Federico wanted to make, that Mayor Pena wanted to make at the time. The building of the airport, the convention center, downtown housing, Coors Field, so I had a great deal of responsibility. For 9 years, I tried to get the city to realize that the lowest income community in this entire city was Sun Valley, which I represented. We needed a new center for those kids. We needed a new recreation center. It was the oldest one in the city. It took me 9 years, and I'm very proud of the fact that I didn't give up on 9 years for those kids to have that recreation center. I think the most professional contribution I made was to show that we could, as Latinas, could be in the same world that had been dominated by males all the time, by showing leadership, by showing strength, and most of all by not being selfish.
La 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 la, buenos dias. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Canción Mexicana. I am Yolanda Ortega. I am a performer. I am a musician. I'm an actor. I am a cultural worker. I am an activist, a community activist. That was Nuestras Tradiciones Culturales. I'm a volunteer at KUVO. And we have listeners who have listened to us since we've went on 35 years ago.
In life, we must share our stories.
One of the loves of my life has been involved with Su Teatro. It's one of the leading Chicano teatros based here in Denver. We began in the 60s and 70s as a whole group of teatros that sprung out of the Chicano movement. If you're part of a movement, if you're part of growing and being successful, you have to do that with your hand reaching out to others. I started working at MSU Denver in 1972. I got a position as a secretary for Chicano Studies. From there, I started getting promoted. From being a director of student activities, I was promoted to assistant dean, and then associate VP, and finally vice president of student affairs. Especially working with Latino students and women, the young Latinas, that was really important for me. We were able to be part of a whole cadre, a whole group of people of color, students of color, that made the universities that much richer.
My name is Martha M. Urioste, and my title is Dr. Martha Urioste. I'm an educator. I became an educator because I love children. I love all children. Actually, my mother wanted me to be a secretary, and I said, no, I can't do that. I want to be an educator. That's what happened. I was in many, many, many assignments. The last one that was so important was North High School as an assistant principal, and then after that I was a Montessori principal at Mitchell Elementary School. And it was the first time that we had ever had a Montessori education in a public school in Denver, Colorado, and the state of Colorado. So it was very, very unique. What I love most about Montessori is that we're educating children to develop their human potential. It's not about tests. It's not about tests. It's about a child becoming who they are by the time they're 24 years of age. And it happens because the children are the ones who are teaching themselves. The Montessori teachers are providing the environment, they're providing the materials, they're sharing the materials. It's the student who is doing all the learning, what's of interest to them, where they will concentrate, what they're going to be doing when they grow up. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. This is to acknowledge a great visionary who has served Family Star with a generous heart. Montessori chose me. I worked 45 years in the Denver Public Schools, and I was so fortunate to be able to realize my dream to help children, all children. I'm still doing that. That's what I love to do.
My name is Patricia Barella Rivera, and I was the former director of the Colorado U.S. Small Business Administration. The first Latina in the country to be an SBA director out of 70 offices. I loved my job. I loved it because we were helping small businesses in the whole state of Colorado. I traveled all 64 counties in the state, and I loved helping people. It was a great job, but it was also one of the most difficult jobs I've ever had. It was male-oriented, male-dominated, and they made it very difficult for me. They would treat me like I wasn't as smart as they were, or that, why am I here in this position as a Latina and a woman? I felt like I put a suit of armor on every day, walk out the door, out of my home, and I have to leave that suit of armor on until I get back home. Because it's coming at you left and right, and you're being tested continuously and being questioned continuously. But I was determined I was going to hang in there. Because when I left, we were giving $1.2 billion in loans to small businesses, and the majority were women and people of color. That had never happened. And that just warms my heart. Hopefully I left a positive legacy for future women to come in and women of color. So because of me and others of us working so hard, we want our younger generation to realize that we have really worked to bring them along.
My name is Adriana Abarca, and I am the founder and board chair of the Latino Cultural Arts Center of Colorado. Growing up here in Denver, I believe that our cultural heritage, for the most part, has been erased or ignored or not adequately represented in the mainstream. If we can make those materials available, then there won't be any excuses for ignorance. So the Latino Cultural Arts Center is intended to represent all of the cultural aspects of the Americas. Our vision is to offer 3 locations, all within 8 blocks of each other, and all in central Denver. Las Bodegas, which is a creation space that will also have a coffee shop. Hijos del Sol, which is the retail component, and the Mexican Heritage Museum. The Museo Colibri, dedicated to all of Latin America. We would have a restaurant, the research library, a small black box theater, and a rooftop event space. And then ultimately, we hope to be able to build an academy of Latino cultural arts. We believe it's important to cement the Latino presence in the inner city, especially in the times of so much gentrification and so much disbursement of our communities. And we need to have a central place to convene and feel pride in where we came from. I hope to teach future generations how to empower themselves, and I hope to set that example for them.
So my name is Charlene Barrientos Ortiz, and I am a community engagement manager. So I work in health research and behavioral health research there at the university, but I work throughout the state with marginalized and communities and underserved communities. So I began my public health career really early on, but it was really when the HIV epidemic hit Denver. It hit close to home, and I had family members who were infected, and there was a lot of stigma and a lot of shame put for those folks who were impacted and infected. People needed to talk about it, and we needed to really work towards healing. So this was in the 80s, mid and late 80s. Folks were ostracized not only from their communities, but from their families. Our communities were harder hit, and sometimes it was harder to talk about it. In terms of community engagement, it was really ensuring that people were at the table, and when they couldn't be, how do we change that? So people in the community would call me a healer. They would call me a curandera. I identify as somebody who prays with my community and prays with my people, and that doesn't just mean Latinos. It is generational. You know, my mom was indigenous, my grandma, they were really rooted in spirituality and religion. But there is this other level of energy and love. If people would just tap into that, when you pray with people and I support them, I guide them, and I facilitate their healing with them, we co-create that. It connects us to the future, and it connects us to the past. I'm thriving compared to where my grandma and my mom were. I'm thriving, and they would be, for sure. My mother was very proud of me. She was just really proud that I stood for community. And in spaces and places that brown women weren't, we weren't supposed to be. And that I was able to sometimes maneuver, sometimes invited, sometimes as a token, but once I got there, I was speaking truth to power.
I'm Lucia Guzman, and I've been called many things. Reverend, because I'm an ordained minister. I'm a senator, so I've been called senator. So I was the first Hispanic to lead the Senate caucus. When I first came to Denver, I came to study theology. We all are called to some place of pain, but there is hope in the struggle, and there's hope in the movement towards righting a wrong. The Senate chamber you're working for the same thing. It was major for me to be one of the first openly gay, lesbian persons to be elected to our chamber, to our Senate chamber. I mean, we had to fight for the Civil Unions Bill, and the passage of that bill was enormous.
My friend, Kiana, is my life partner.
Another major milestone on the journey that is the project of Your Sacred Union.
We would hear comments on the other side that were very discouraging and very hurtful, very painful. But this is why it's important for us to be elected and for us to be there, because people need to know us as whole persons, not just a gay person here, a lesbian there, a transgender person here, but get to know us as real people, as whole people. We're as whole as anybody else. This thing really grew this year. All of those things mixed together, and it all has brought me to this place of hope, because life is hard. It's not easy. It's really not a bed of roses. It is hard, but we're called to be better citizens. At the end of our lives, that's where we should look back and say, I walked that trail, I felt those thorns, but I'm thankful.
Well, I'd like to introduce myself as Nita Gonzalez. I am a Chicana activist involved in this community for the duration of my life as well, many generations. And more importantly, I am a daughter of the Chicano movement. I started very young organizing. I grew up in a family that was involved in social justice, the eldest daughter of Adolfo Corky Gonzalez and Geraldine Gonzalez. I was a young organizer. I knew when there were issues or problems, but I wanted to also figure out then how do we take care of that? How do we change that? At that time, that parents came together with my father in my father's living room, and they were over it with the school system. They were not getting any response. They felt they were losing their children. They were not academically succeeding, and they were losing who they were culturally and spiritually. And so they decided to start a school. And they started Escuela Tlatelolco, Centro de Estudios, at the Crusade building with 300 students, K through 12. I became a teacher with Escuela. I taught every grade level. I taught science, which I loved. I loved science, and I taught it from a different lens. I taught it from a lens of caretaker. I became the administrator of Escuela in 1981 and grew it from there. It was a sacred place to transfer culture and tradition, to inspire young people to stand up, to lead. We had children of activists, grandchildren of activists, and great-grandchildren. And why I'm proud about that work is that I can point to graduates that have gone on in their lives and have been incredible human beings and participants in their community.
It's been approximately 50 years, and the newer generations have to find their own identity. But it served us well. It unified us. It pushed us forward. It propelled us. And I hope for the younger generations, whether they self-identify as Mexicans or Latinx, whatever they want to call themselves, they should do so with great pride.
It gave a people pride. It gave a people history. It gave a people culture. It gave a people their place. That this is our homeland. That sí puedes hablar en español cuando quieras. We couldn't do that. We couldn't speak in Spanish. You would not have been able to speak that language here without the Chicano movement.
I think young people now don't know how good they have it, that you can go to a local library and find a bilingual children's book, and with images of brown people.
And now we have scientists and doctors and engineers and small business people and corporate CEOs, but not the way it should be. We need more.
But our work is not done, because freedom is not free. We still have a lot more to do.
I think one of the areas that we still need to address is the economic inequity that exists. The dropout rate for young Mexican Americans or young Chicanos in high schools, the relatively low number of Chicano youth that go on to university education, the number of professors, the number of politicians, representation.
We need to change educational systems. Our educational systems haven't changed in years. We keep doing the same old thing. Testing, testing, testing. The kids are bored.
Why are we not gotten any further? Where do you see movies about just Latino families? Where do you see different TV programs where it's just two groups? Where do you see Hispanics? Where do you see Asians? Where do you see Native Americans?
I can't believe we are still contending with police brutality and the inequities in housing and employment. We add to it now the issue of healthcare and environment.
We have a lot of work, but I'm hopeful. And this community engagement, as we call it now, it is really just making sure that our communities are, that they're involved and included and are part of the decision-making power. It's not just asking the medical community to show up. They need to listen. They need to hire people who look like us to do the work, and they need to support pipeline issues and making sure that people get the education to do the work. All of our voices are equal.
We still have a long way to go, but it's practically night and day from 50 years ago.
And now look at how many legislators we have, Latino legislators we have in the State House. Look how many we have on City Council.
Councilwoman Amanda P. Sandoval, representing District 1.
I, Amanda Sandoval.
Councilwoman Jamie Torres, representing District 3.
Hi, Jamie Torres.
Councilwoman Candy Lee Citabaca, representing District 9.
Hi, Candy Citabaca.
And Councilwoman Debbie Ortega at large.
Hi, Deborah Ortega.
This is the highest number of Latina women that we've ever had on City Council. So that door has been opened, and it's up to them to make sure that that door continues to stay open.
The greatest legacy and testament is not the brick and mortar, but how people live their lives based on those principles and values.
When people say, are you Chicana? I probably smile, because for me it's more than a word. It is movement. It is, literally energy, movement, and gaining all of that of the women who have done that before me. And so I feel that when I hear it. It's a bright light for me. I hear my ancestors, I hear power, I hear love, I hear connectedness. I hear and I feel it. I had all these threads in my ancestors to draw on, and they were so there with me, always.
Someone asked me, when are you going to retire? I said, what? What? You don't retire from struggle. You don't retire from seeking social justice. You don't retire fighting against inequity. As long as that exists, we have to act. We have to stand up. We have to speak out. And women are learning that they have great power to do that.
Chávez, sin dilación, nuestra bendita Virgen bonita. historia, habrá alegría en la nación. Yo estoy con Chávez, sí, sí, señor. Yo estoy con Chávez y con la unión. Yo estoy con Chávez, sí, sí, señor. Yo estoy con Chávez.